First thing I'm going to do here is define my surface. Basically what this is going to be is kind of like designing the surface and then projecting a light on the surface and constructing the shadow, okay? But unlike what we have been doing, this is going to be in one direction, a fully curved surface, okay? So the first thing we want to do is do some sort of a little orthographic so that we can kind of define our surface and kind of understand it completely. Right? So I'm just kind of putting together a little orthographic grid here so that I can start to plan out my surface. There's my baseline. So I'm giving each little view its own little box, which is kind of, should hopefully be pretty familiar to you guys. I'll define the kind of top of my elevations, give my plan view a baseline, and then I've got my little corner. I put my 45-degree line to do any translation I need to do from the plan to the side elevation or vice versa. Give myself a little back edge as well. Okay. So I know because of my transition line that these line up. So that's just something I automatically know because I use this format for my orthographic. So I know that my kind of depth this way, my depth this way are going to correspond just without even doing anything. So I'm going to define a shape that kind of has a ramp here, and then is kind of just fully curved through there. Okay. Pretty ugly line there, but it's good enough for us to talk about it, okay? Kind of got an intersection point right there with my box I put around everything. Go ahead and bring some of these details up into my plan view. I'm going to kind of move this edge and that edge coincide too much, so I'm going to move my endpoint to right there. Just to make things fun, I'm going to add another little straight line contour to this edge here. So instead of going straight back, it's actually going to go diagonally like that. Okay? And then my front, this bottom edge here, that's just going to go straight across. Okay. And it's not quite right. See, so I'm using this pen. I'm getting a little bit messy, but this is just something, just a quick kind of underlay level drawing, so I'm not too worried about that. I'll come over here, kind of ghost in the line where that happens. I know there's a transition point right there because I used two different curves and kind of intersected them, so I'm going to note that intersection point. So I had a curve going like that, and then I brought another curve down like that, and then I had to kind of blend them together. So the point where I blended it, one blending point was right here where it touches that edge of my box, and the other blending point was right there. So just going to note those. It's going to help me to think about what I'm doing, essentially. Okay. So I brought that back, so I need to show that on my ortho, on the elevation. That luckily corresponds with that tangent point with my outside box. So that's great. Finally, I'm going to bring this point over. So final line. Final surface. Go ahead, bring that point over. So my lower side is going to be on the the left side of my side elevation here, and then the higher side is going to be on the right. Right. Go ahead, draw that line. Okay. Did I do something wrong? Correct me, catch me, you get bonus points. Now I'm just going to burn that in so I can see that that's the actual object that I want to deal with. All right? Okay. So I've got my surface defined. I know where the back is, where my the top of my surface is, and where the kind of bottom of my ramp is. So now I'm going to go ahead and start to chart this out in perspective. So I could use my plan views to kind of project this into the perspective plane, but I'm going to show you guys a little different way to do it. So I'm going to start just with my perspective baselines and kind of guess at my width and depth. Okay, so the width here, I'm going to basically put this view, put my plan view right here. I'm sorry, elevation. Right there. And then my kind of plan, or I'm sorry, my side elevation is essentially going to be right here. Yeah, so this definitely wants to be a hidden line there. Okay, so here is my side elevation. All right, this view is not, we're not actually seeing, but it's going to be pretty similar to that one. And then, you know, we can talk about the plan view here. So, again, I look at my elevation, and this should be maybe something more. Bring this forward, something like that. Okay. I'll move this forward a bit. That forward a lot, and that's going to be the end of my surface. Okay. Verticals to establish my initial box. Okay. And my height is pretty similar to width, like that. I'm just kind of eyeballing this stuff. So this is the type of stuff where if I was going to prep this for a final composition, I'd definitely either take the time to actually project the plan view into the perspective, or at least double check my result here to make sure that it's accurate. Okay. So now I can go up here, make that mark on the top, bring this mark up to the top, and then I need to come down a little bit because this is a little bit off the top. That's actually on the top. So if that's my point, just connect those dots. Now I'm going to just take my elevation and put it in my elevation, on my elevation plane. Okay, I know I'm starting here, and then I go up to there. And then about 2/3 of the way down, I've got another intersection point. And then just a little bit in, I've got my other intersection point, my curve. There's the first point, so I'm just going to do this curve, something like that. Finish off this curve. Like that, and then blend them just like I did in my orthographic. Alright, then I can bring this point back to here, going back to my vanishing point, and that point is already there. This point can also come back somewhere like that. Is there a Sharpie over there? Or if you can hand me that little bag right there. So, sometimes when you're sketching, you gotta move up to a different weapon, okay? So, just like you'd move through, you know, a kind of 0.1 thickness to a 0.5, you know, it's essentially the same idea. But you can do it. If you have some pens that are broken up that way, you can use that, or you can just move between pen thicknesses that you like using totally different pens. Because this is kind of a sketch, you know, I'm not super concerned with some of those issues as far as like exactly what drawing utensil I'm using. Right, so it's not Prismacolor isn't. I'm not going to live and die by it on all my sketches. Okay, it's important for you guys to learn how to use it, but it's also important to be able to switch up. Okay, now the final thing I'm going to do here is just connect my two side curves. Okay, so there's a pretty good representation of my compound curved surface. A little rough. It's good enough. I could go in here and do an overlay, which I may do eventually here to tighten things up, but I think for now I'm just going to stick with what I got. Okay, so now we get into the shadow. So just to keep things easy, I'm going to go with a direction of light that's flat. And then I'm going to go with kind of a 45-degree angle of light. Okay. And now we kind of have some choices to make about where we start. There's a variety of different ways that you could potentially do it. I'm going to start at the corner closest to me and then kind of work back and down. So that, in this case, is this one. So I'm going to go, you know what, I'm going to use an overlay for this, just to keep my life simple. Can you hand me the pad of paper? Okay, so we're about to put a lot of lines down, and I might as well go with a fresh piece. see if I can just ghost this in. Then I can kind of see my box in the background, and that's, maybe I'll put in some of these baselines actually, just so that I keep my reference points. Okay. So again, direction, angle. Okay. We'll start off right here. And I'm basically going to go straight down to my orthographic baseline. Find that point. Okay, so now I just defined a stick, right? If we remember triangle of light, you're talking about put the angle of light at the top of the stick and the direction at the bottom. So this is a stick. I'm going to go out on my direction. And then out on my angle, okay? So the shadow for that point right there is right there, okay? Now I'm gonna go ahead, do the same thing over here. Now these are at different heights, but it doesn't really matter because of the method that I'm using. I don't necessarily account for that. All right. Direction. I'm just going super light so that I'm going to have as many of these lines as I need to make sure that everything's correct. So I'm going to do them in real light. So connect that a little darker because I'm pretty confident that's going to be my shadow. All right. Now I've also got a point right about there where theoretically my curve should hit the edge of my box. It's a pretty good reference point. All ready to go. There. I'm going to also grab kind of my transition point, which is right about there, and then we'll maybe grab some midpoint as well. Okay, so this line goes to that line, this point goes to that point. You kind of got to keep in mind where you're at so that you can track your dots properly. Okay, so bring that down. Point right there. This is basically my angle and direction of light. Goes right there. Okay. Bring this down. There's my stick. Here's my angle and direction of light. Right about there. Okay. Now I kind of know enough that I could just kind of do something like that, but I will show you guys some more stuff. So I know that this line kind of comes down, and that point that's tangent to my box is also where that point ends. So I can bring down that line. It's probably more right there. Center point. Actually kind of unexpectedly far away, huh? It's way up there. Makes me think I did something wrong. So I don't know where I was going from that point, but that was mistaken. I don't think I made a mistake. that's what it actually should be. Cross that out. And that makes kind of a lot more sense too. Got a shape kind of like that. Okay, so I've kind of charted down this front line, so now let's go ahead and figure out what that back line is going to be. I can pretty much use some of my same points. I can use that one. There. Use that transition point down to this rear baseline. Line that up again. And then this point back here where theoretically my curve should be touching the side of my box. Bring that down to my baseline to find the bottom of my stick. Triangle. There we go. And then I'll also go ahead and take that tangent point where I lose sight of the back of my surface. Bring that down to my rear baseline. That point over there. I think did I make some mistake there too? Screwed up there at the beginning, but that's correct. All right, double check that. Yep, okay, so this is where the line should connect. That line is not going to go back to a vanishing point. Well, that line's not going to go back to my left vanishing point, even though it kind of looks like it might. It's actually going to go back to the same vanishing point that this goes back to, because they're parallel. Okay, so parallel lines always meet at the same vanishing point. Just somewhere over there, okay? And then I've got this curve to draw in. Right there. Can connect, this is my tangent line, so I connect tangent to tangent. That's essentially that line right there. That line, these lines should go back to the vanishing point. And I'm just burning that in so I can kind of see it real nicely, okay? Now remember, these are kind of all overlaid on each other, so when they cross, they kind of lose each other, so. My shadow. Something like that. Okay, that's the easy part. Let's do the hard part. So, we've seen the shadow that's on the ground, but there's actually obviously going to be shadow on the actual surface, right? So, basically the same process. You figure out a point, you drop that point. That's the best way to do this. So, let's start with a point that's actually going to end up on that surface.
So, can we use a different color and they're easy to make sure?
Jeez. So much. Sure, we can use another. Whether I have another color pen. Anybody have a pencil sharpener that they can grab for me?
There is a color pen.
There are color pen.
Oh, you got a colored pencil right there. Yeah, sweet. Easy peasy. Let's do green. Okay, so. We go from our point of interest, we're going to do this one. All right, so we'll drop that down. And that hits our surface right there. Okay, so now we're going to take, go across, right?
This line is the direction for the angle.
Say that again.
This line is the direction angle, just a vertical line to.
This is just a kind of parallel line with the goes back to the vanishing point. It's not actually in perspective. That's the right line. Okay. All right. Okay. Okay. So we have this point back down here. So actually what we want to do is bring this point forward in perspective to one of the baselines. Okay. So again, this point we figured out, we brought this down to our baseline. We want to cross with our direction. Again, we're on the ground still, right? And then we went at an angle, I'm sorry, it's this point over here. We went at an angle down with our directional light. Okay? So that's actually not going to be a good point either. Let's do this middle point right there. I think that's probably a better one. All right, so I bring my middle point down some distance. I'm not sure exactly how much I'm going to go. And then I got to bring it back because I got this angle here. So I'm going to go back to this top line of my box and then go back down to the bottom edge of my box and then go forward. Okay, so now I'm just kind of moving this point around my box. Okay. It's not quite in perspective. Go. Okay. Now, so here is where my point, where this point hits the ground if I go straight down. So now from there, I can grab this point here. Just a second, I'm screwing this up. Okay, so I bring this down, find that point there, right? That's a point on my surface, and then I'm going to do contour line, like that, okay, and then I'm basically going to, okay, so this contour line goes from my chosen point around to the point on my surface below, okay? So this contour point is essentially kind of following my surface, all right? So now I just put my direction and angle of light triangle here, and then wherever that hits this line here, that is where my shadow is going to go, okay? So that's what I forgot my contour line there, okay? So, let's see if we can also do that with this guy, okay? So we've already got our contour line for this one because it's the edge of the surface. We've got our point where we hit on our surface is right there. So I can just put that right there. That point is not on the surface. Or if I chose too steep of an angle of light. think I chose too steep of an angle of light. So I think we're going to end up with a shadow that essentially you can't really see. Because of this angle of light. So let me try switching this up. Okay, so let's forget about that. All that stuff still holds for getting this onto the floor, but the problem is because this angle is so flat, all of these shadow points are kind of falling off of my surface. So I'm gonna go ahead and change my angle to do that. Just for the, yeah, I'm sorry, my angle, my direction. So green is for that direction of light. I think that's going to give us a much better result. All right. So like that, direction. Angle somewhere right there. Okay. And then for this guy. Here's our point on our surface. So we've got direction. An angle. We've got a point there. And then for this one, we've got direction. Angle right there. So we're going to have a line that goes basically like that. Okay. Then we can go ahead and bring this guy down again to our surface. And we're going to have direction. All right, so the kind of, this is going to cast a shadow here, and that shadow is going to have a endpoint there, and then it's going to kind of curve, follow that curvature around, and then behind there. Just darken up this shape since it's getting a little lost here. So then let's maybe take a point like that. So we drop it down. To our surface. And then we get from there our angle. Direction somewhere over there. So curve is going to go somewhere actually like this. And then we can do the same thing with this point here. Bring it down to our surface. Direction. Angle. That. Okay. So here is our final shadow for that direction. sorry, not the clearest demo, but you get the idea that you can basically move points down to the surface and then use the angle of direction in order to figure out where that shadow falls on that surface. It's not the perfect shadow, but it will follow these contours and look like it sits on that surface.
The concept is like use a box outline and help us to find.
Yes, exactly.
If we use a direction like this angle, this shadow like that one?
Yes. Yeah. So I mean, I can keep. It's almost 5. Let me just keep doing. Let me redo this shadow here, just so that you guys can kind of see what kind of ends up happening. So right here, this point here is kind of off the plane. So what I can do is I can kind of double. I can look at that point on the floor as well as on the surface. Okay, so there's my direction. There's my angle. Somewhere back there. I can also do that with this guy. Do something like that. There. Alrighty. So lost in my marks here. This guy. Well, I'm kind of lost in the marks here, sorry guys. But yeah, basically what you'll see is that as the light, or as the shadow comes to the end, it'll then fall down onto the ground plane, all right? So, rather than watch me muddle through it, let's all give it a try, and we can each muddle through it on our own, okay? So, back to the desks, quickly sketch up with the orthographics.